You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
Recently, on 30th March, Brazil's drug regulator ANVISA had rejected Bharat Biotech's application for supplying Covaxin in the country. The reason being that they claim Bharat Biotech, which is the Hyderabad-based pharma company that is manufacturing the Swadeshi vaccine in India, hasn't taken adequate measures to completely kill or inactivate the virus. They've also alleged a few other problems with the vaccine. ANVISA claimed that there was a possibility of variations in the potency and antigen quantity in the vaccine doses. Basically, they pointed to the lack of a guarantee in how safe Covaxin is. And so Brazil decided to not go ahead and buy the 20 million Covaxin doses that it was planning on getting, even though it's the third most affected country in this pandemic after India. He said that Brazil won't buy the doses until Bharat Biotech fixes these problems. But these irregularities that ANVISA is pointing out, why did the CDSCO not raise them before? And also, after these matters came to light, why has it not taken any action?
You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline making news for you. And I'm your host, Shorburi.
My guest for today's podcast is Priyanka Pulla, a freelance science journalist based in Bangalore. Hi, Priyanka. You've been on a podcast before, and I once again welcome you to The Big Story.
I'm glad to be here.
Priyanka, you've written an in-depth story for the Quint about these allegations raised by ANVISA. Let me also tell our listeners here that the story is up on the Quint website as well. Please check it out. And we're here to understand from you, Priyanka, in this podcast as to how serious ANVISA's allegations are and what it means for India, especially as we know from reports that the center plans to ramp up Covaxin production to up to 100 million doses per month by September. And we also want to know as to how India and Bharat Biotech are responding to these criticisms. So let's start with the allegations itself. ANVISA says that they're not sure that Bharat Biotech has taken measures to properly kill or inactivate the virus. If I understand it correctly, if such an allegation can be proven, does it not mean that people can get COVID from the vaccination itself, Priyanka?
Yes. So I will explain a little bit about the process of manufacturing the inactivated vaccine.
Right.
It's important to understand that there are multiple levels of quality control.
Right.
So as I explained in my story, the first step is to inactivate or kill the virus. Now, you're basically making sure it cannot replicate in your body anymore and cannot infect you. And the manufacturer will do it with either a heat or a chemical. Now, the second step is to prove that the inactivation is complete, that it worked. So this is the quality control step. Now, there are many ways to do this. One of the oldest, simplest tests, for a polio virus vaccine was they would basically put the inactivated virus in a cell line and then check if the cell line is showing cytopathic effects, which means that check if the virus is killing those cells. So even if a little bit of virus is left in your product after you have finished the inactivation, it would show up in this test, in this proof of inactivation. So that is the second step. Now, beyond that, there is a third step which you need to do, which is that you need to prove that this proof of inactivation is valid. Okay. And this is done in terms of sensitivity, specificity. Now, a very simple way of looking at specificity is that, if you look at the cell line test I just described, you put the virus in the cell line and you see if there are any effects on the cells. You have to make sure that no other virus is killing that cell, right? And it is only this SARS-CoV-2 virus which you are testing for. Otherwise, that test will go off with something else and, you don't know if it's specific. Sensitivity means that even tiny amounts of virus are still there. You need to be able to detect it. So if tiny amounts of virus are not killing those cells, are not showing the effects you're looking for, it's not sensitive enough. Now, what we know or what ANVISA alleges is that Bharat Biotech did not follow the third step. So basically, they did, we are assuming they did inactivate the product. And they did a test for inactivation, but they did not validate the test for inactivation. So what this means is that you're right. These steps exist for a reason. They are two steps away from actually the basic step of inactivation. They're two sort of degrees of separation away from that. But still, these are very important steps because we have seen a lot of incidents in the past when we neglected these steps, live virus ended up in the vaccine. So you're right, the risk of not doing these quality control steps, and the reason these steps exist is that the vaccine itself might give you the virus.
So, among the major and minor criticisms, they've also said that Bharat Biotech did not also ensure the sterility and purity of Covaxin. Can you please also explain what this means?
Yes. So, sterility means that the vaccine should not contain any viable microorganisms, right? Any microbe or spore, something that can, again, replicate in your body. And this is apart from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Now, why is this important? Because vaccines are injected into our bodies. Now, if we take an oral drug, it will pass through a gastrointestinal system, and that has many protections. There are, strong acids and enzymes, and there's an immune system. All this will protect you even if there is some microbial contamination. But when you're injecting the vaccine directly into your blood, even if there is just a little bit of some microbe, it can give you an infection. So it's very risky. So ensuring this doesn't happen is called ensuring sterility.
Right.
Yeah. Now, how do manufacturers ensure this? Now, this is a huge process. Like, many of us lay people don't really have an idea, but it has to happen at every step of manufacturing. The entire manufacturing line has to be tightly monitored. The water which goes into the manufacturing plant, the air that is circulated, any of this can have the microbes. And in the core area of the plant where the vaccine is finally filled into the vials, they're very, very tight controls. Workers have to wear sterile gowns, they have to wear sterile shoe covers. There are technologies like laminar airflow that are used where, the air basically flows in with the same velocity in the same direction so that particulate matter doesn't get distributed in an unpredictable way. So this entire process of ensuring sterility is a fairly huge enterprise. And ANVISA has not, in its report, revealed what exactly they thought was a risk to sterility. So we don't know what it was. Any of these many things could have gone wrong. But, I have read previous reports for sterile injectable plants, which raise issues about sterility. And there are things like, the workers were not changing their socks before entering the clean area. So the socks itself could have brought microbes into the clean area, and that has actually happened. So lots of really tiny things have to be controlled in a sterile injectable or vaccine plant. About purity, again, it's a similar thing. Purity means that there should be nothing apart from the inactivated virus, an adjuvant, which basically is something you mix to enhance the immune response, and excipients, which add the bulk and volume to that. Apart from this, there should be nothing else. So microbes are one side of the story, but impurities are, the other chemicals that can get into this product at various stages in the manufacturing process. Again, we don't know why exactly ANVISA said impurity was an issue because they don't give any details.
Okay. And a third problem was that of the potency measurements as well. What does this mean? That different doses may have different variations?
Yes, that's correct. So again, potency is, when I spoke to some experts, they said potency for a vaccine is typically measured in terms of the antigen. Now, the antigen is a protein on the surface of the virus, which will basically be recognized by your body and elicit the immune response, the antibodies in your body. So it is the antigen which is the most crucial part of your vaccine. So typically for measuring vaccine potency for all existing vaccines like the flu vaccine or the rabies vaccine is done in terms of the number of units of an antigen. Whereas what Bharat Biotech has done according to ANVISA is that they have used total protein. Now, why is total protein an issue? What ANVISA says and what my sources also told me is that if you measure total protein, you will also, in that amount, you will get both degraded antigen and intact antigen, right? Now, antigen can degrade. during the manufacturing process. Now, if
Okay.
it has degraded, it will not elicit an immune response in your body, right? It will not be effective.
Right.
Whereas it is intact, it will. But if you're counting degraded plus intact together to say it's effective, it probably will not be. So that is the issue which Anvisa had pointed out. And incidentally, this kind of potency issues are really are something which are tackled by every vaccine manufacturer. This is not specific to Bharat Biotech alone. Similar issues have been reported with the mRNA vaccines too, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines in early days. Yeah.
Priyanka, in your article, you said that these factors that we're talking of right now is required to be proven under both Indian and Brazilian laws. There's a set of standards to follow that you mentioned in your article called the Good Manufacturing Practices, or the GMP, that was brought in to avoid man-made epidemics triggered by unsafe vaccines. So my question is, what can go wrong if the GMP isn't followed? I mean, one thing that I know that has been reported of is how 15 million doses manufactured by Johnson & Johnson had to be discarded because it didn't meet the standards, which is why keeping an eye out on all this is so important at all stages, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, there was a mix-up between at one of the American facilities, which was making both the AstraZeneca vaccine and the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, and they mixed up the ingredients between these two vaccines. So I'm not really sure how it happened, but yes, that would be a GMP issue. Maintaining the separation. I believe the US FDA had a rule that the same facility cannot manufacture two different types of similar platform vaccines, and that wasn't followed in this case. So yes, and the other thing I want to point out is that good manufacturing practices are the minimum set of requirements to ensure quality. Now, a lot of people have been pointing out after this story, my story was published, is that different countries have different requirements, and maybe India's requirements are different. In this case, it isn't true, but I will also say that good manufacturing practices exist for a reason. A regulator is not going to impose a rule that leads to an unnecessary cost for the manufacturer. They will not ask you to validate your proof of inactivation if they don't believe that there is a serious risk to the end consumer, right? So because we also want to ensure access to these vaccines, we don't want to kill the industry. So these rules exist for a reason. These rules are very critical. They are not trivial. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that the ANVISA report also said that their inspection revealed 3 critical violations of GMP, 12 major violations, and 14 minor violations. Now, 3 critical findings sounds not only like the GMP measures were violated, but that the violations were pretty serious in terms of affecting the health of the end consumer. So if what ANVISA says is true, it is a genuine worry that the product may be unsafe or ineffective.
And an important question that you've also raised in your story is, why did the CDSCO not raise these same problems when Covaxin was licensed for use in India? Of course, Covaxin was granted a license in a hurried manner that was criticized by a lot of experts, in which the approval was granted without finishing the clinical trial or even evaluating the efficacy. So do you think that the fact that Covaxin was given license in a clinical, quote-unquote, clinical trial phase, a process that we've never seen before, without adequate data too, does it all make these allegations a bit concerning for India as well?
Yes, I personally think that the way in which the phase 3 trials were waived, they were not skipped, but the approval was given for the vaccine to be given to most people even before the phase 3 trial was completed. That is an indication of pressure on the company to put this vaccine out quickly, to put an indigenous Atmanirbhar made in India vaccine out quickly. So that is the reason why I'm willing to take ANVISA's allegations more seriously, because we have already seen evidence of the amount of pressure on Bharat Biotech by the government to do things fast, even if it leads to a loss of due diligence. So yes, I think I definitely think that CDSCO owes the 11 million people who have been given Covaxin an answer to these questions.
And when you reached out to the CDSCO and also Bharat Biotech for a comment, what did they say? Did they answer any of your questions?
No, I never heard back from the Drug Controller General of India, who's the head of CDSCO. This is, in fact, a repeated problem with our drug regulator. They're very unapproachable to the media. Bharat Biotech said there was a misunderstanding and that ANVISA would issue a clarification in 2 or 3 days, but they did not. But when I specifically asked them if they had validated the proof of inactivation, I did not get an answer to that. And no clarification from ANVISA has come out so far.
Okay, so now that the government has roped in Hafkin Biopharmaceuticals to manufacture Covaxin and also to other public sector companies, if these problems have not been resolved yet in Covaxin, do they then extend to the doses that will be manufactured by these companies as well?
Yeah, in Hafkine's case, yes, because I think Bharat Biotech is transferring the technology to them. So absolutely, the same issues will apply to them as well, because I believe they're going to transfer the bulk inactivated product to Hafkine. And if so, they still have to demonstrate kinetics of inactivation, validation of proof of inactivation, go the whole hog. But in general, I believe Hafkine in any case is not going to start manufacturing for at least a year because they need to set up a BSL-3 facility. So I do foresee quite a few problems going ahead in scaling up this vaccine.
Thanks a lot, Priyanka, for being a part of this podcast and giving us an in-depth understanding of vaccine manufacturing protocols.
Thank you.
And once again, I'd also like to tell our listeners that you can also read her story on the Quint website. And while you do that, please also check out Quint Fit, which is the Quint's health vertical for other COVID-related stories.
If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story playlist for episodic updates. We're live on Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website and check out the podcast section. For any feedback, shoot an email to podcasts@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.